It was a freezing November night. The clock had just struck 11:45 p.m. While the rest of the city was wrapping itself in the quiet blanket of sleep, the narrow, winding alleys of Chinatown were still awake, steeped in an eerie, unsettling mystery. Red paper lanterns swayed gently in the cold wind, casting ghostly crimson shadows across the damp cobblestone streets. The air was heavy, thick with the mingled scents of roasted duck, burning incense, and decaying BRICKWORK.AYAN. A freelance photographer and an avid collector of vintage cameras had been wandering these streets for days. A local elder had whispered a rumor to him. At the very dead end of Double Dragon Alley, there was an antique shop that sold relics from centuries past. The alley was so narrow that two people could barely walk shoulder to shoulder. As Ian walked deeper, he noticed the ambient noise of the city completely fading away. The neon signs flickered and died out here. Finally, at the very end of the passage, he stood before a rotting wooden door. A faded signboard hung above it, displaying Mandarin characters, and below them, in English, Lin's Curiosities and Antiques. The shop's windows were thick with decades of grime. A single dim oil lamp burned inside. Ian grasped the brass doorknob. It turned with a sharp, ear-piercing creak, and the door swung open. Stepping inside felt like plummeting backward in time. The shop was crammed with relics, rusted swords, cracked porcelain dolls with empty eyes, oxidized brass dragons, and rows of grandfather clocks. Yet apart from the synchronized tick-tock of the clocks, the shop possessed the heavy, suffocating silence of a graveyard. "Is anyone here?" Ian called out. His voice echoed unnaturally, bouncing off the walls. From the darkest corner of the room, a raspy, papery voice replied, "Those who seek lost time always find their way to my door." Ian spun around. Standing behind a heavy oak counter was an old man dressed in a faded silk tunic. His skin was wrinkled like crumpled parchment, and his eyes were entirely black. There were no irises, no whites, just a pair of endless, terrifying voids. I'm looking for a vintage camera," Ian stammered, taking a step back. Mr. Lin smiled. His yellowed teeth gleamed maliciously in the dim light. "A camera. A machine to capture time. Yes, I have something you have never seen before." The old man reached beneath the counter and pulled out a heavy wooden box. Opening it, he revealed an immaculate 1890s mahogany and brass bull's eye camera, complete with a manual magnesium flash gun. "This is incredible." Ian reached out to touch it, but his eyes darted to a thick, dust-covered, leather-bound album resting on the counter. Engraved in gold lettering on the cover were the words, "Trapped Moments." Drawn by an unnatural compulsion, Ian opened the album without asking. The first few pages held black and white Victorian-era portraits. But something was terribly wrong. None of the subjects were smiling. Their eyes were widened in sheer panic, their faces contorted in absolute terror. As Ian turned to the third page, a chill shot down his spine. It was a photograph of a woman in a corseted dress. As he stared at her, the woman's eyes slowly shifted inside the photograph and looked directly at him. Ian gasped and slammed the album shut. What kind of photos are these?" Mr. Lin's lips curled into a sinister grin. "They are my most prized collection. You see, they aren't dead. They are merely trapped in a specific moment, forever. Ian's heart hammered against his ribs. He tried to convince himself it was just a trick of the dim light, an optical illusion. I just want the camera. How much is it? Ian reached for his wallet, but his instincts were screaming at him to run. The air in the shop had suddenly dropped to a freezing temperature. It felt heavy, making it difficult to draw a breath. Mr. Lin slowly shook his head. Money cannot buy this camera, young man. The price must be paid differently. The old man stepped out from behind the counter. He didn't seem to walk. He glided, his feet seemingly not touching the floorboards. What are you talking about? I'm leaving, Ian panicked. He spun around to head for the exit, but he froze in horror. The wooden door he had just walked through was gone. In its place was a solid, seamless brick wall. It is easy to enter, but impossible to leave. Lin's raspy voice echoed from all corners of the room at once. This camera is no ordinary machine. It separates the soul from the flesh. You are a photographer, aren't you? You capture people. Tonight, you shall become a masterpiece yourself. Ian tried to scream, but his vocal cords paralyzed. His eyes fell upon the leather album again. It had fallen open to the last page. It was a photograph of a teenage boy, the same boy whose face had been plastered all over the city's missing person posters last week. In the photo, the boy's mouth was open in a silent, agonizing scream, his hands pressed flat against the glossy surface of the photo paper, as if trying to break through an invisible glass. They cannot escape, Lin whispered. He was now holding the heavy wooden camera, aiming it directly at Ian. Not until a new soul takes their place in the lens. No. Stay back. Ian grabbed a heavy brass statue from a nearby table and hurled it at the old man's head. But the statue phased right through Lin's shadowy body, crashing into the wall behind him. Lin wasn't human. He was a phantom. Smile. Lin cackled, his voice distorting into a demonic pitch. The lens of the camera looked like a bottomless black tunnel, and inside it, Ian saw hundreds of distorted, ghostly faces reaching out for him. They were whispering in his mind, "Come to us. We are so lonely. It is so dark in here." Lin pulled the trigger on the flash gun. The magnesium powder ignited. A blinding, agonizingly bright white light swallowed the entire room. Ian felt as if a bolt of lightning had struck his brain. He felt his flesh dissolving, his very existence shattering into a million pieces. He let out one final, blood-curdling scream before everything faded to black. When Ian regained consciousness, he felt no physical pain. But everything was horribly wrong. There was no sound. Absolute, deafening silence. He couldn't hear the grandfather clocks, the wind outside, or even his own heartbeat. He opened his eyes and looked around. The world was devoid of color. Everything was entirely rendered in stark shades of black, white, and gray. He realized he was standing in a strange, flattened void. He tried to raise his hands, but they wouldn't move. He tried to take a step, but his feet felt like they were fused into the ground. He could only slightly turn his neck. To his left stood the Victorian woman from the album. Her body was frozen, but silent black tears of endless agony streamed down her pale face. To his right stood the missing boy, still screaming a scream that made no sound. "Where am I?" Ayan tried to shout, but he had no lungs to push air through. He looked straight ahead. In front of him was a massive, invisible wall of transparent glass. And beyond that glass, he saw Mr. Lin's antique shop. But the shop was in full, vibrant color. Mr. Lin was standing behind the counter, gently wiping dust off the leather-bound album. The horrifying realization crashed over Ayan like a tidal wave. He wasn't dead. He had been sucked into the camera. He was inside the album. He was now a two-dimensional, black and white photograph. Ayan pushed against the invisible glass, the glossy finish of the photo paper, with all his non-existent might. But he was trapped in his frozen posture. He could only move his eyes. Suddenly, the shop bell rang. The wooden door opened, and a young woman walked in. She held a tourist map, her eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "Excuse me," she said brightly to Mr. Lin. "I was told I could find old Polaroid cameras here." From the other side of the glass, Mr. Lin smiled his horrific, toothy grin. "Of course, my dear. But before that, would you care to look at my special collection?" Lin slid the leather-bound album across the counter toward her. Inside the photograph, Ayan screamed with all the invisible force in his soul. "No, run. Don't open it. Get out of here." But his warnings were trapped in the silence of the paper. The girl smiled and began turning the pages. First page, second page. Then her smile vanished. She froze, staring down at a freshly added page in the book. Ayan watched through the glass barrier as the girl stared in sheer horror at his photograph. She was looking at Ayan's face, his expression locked in an eternal state of absolute terror. His mouth open in a silent scream, his eyes begging for help. The girl gasped and stumbled backward, dropping her map. But it was too late. Mr. Lin had already raised the antique mahogany camera. Ayan watched helplessly from his black and white hell as Lin aimed the cursed lens at the terrified girl. Another blinding flash of magnesium powder erupted. Ayan could not close his eyes. He realized his punishment. He would be forced to stand here, awake and aware in this paper prison, watching for all eternity as new souls were lured into the shop and consumed by the flash. For Aishan, the last night in Chinatown would never see the dawn. He was now and forever just another trapped moment.